Welcome back. So, we told you yesterday that the president-elect of the UK's biggest teaching union has claimed the government is, quote, brutally racist. Well, the National Education Union is under the spotlight again today after its members voted to invite more drag queens into schools. So, there's been previous events all over the country, hasn't there, despite a number of protests from concerned parents. Teachers have now given their backing to inviting LGBT plus authors to speak in schools. Now, look, that's all right in itself, isn't it? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's a more kind of drag queen element to this, and potentially if some of those performances turn graphic towards kids. Now, earlier this week, Channel 4 broadcast a programme called Naked Education, where adults, and I can't believe I'm saying this, stripped butt naked in front of children as young as 14. I thought you used to get locked up for doing that kind of stuff, but there we go. Joining me now is Peter Tatchell, who's an LGBTQ activist and director of the Peter Tatchell Foundation, and Oli London, who's a social media influencer and author of Gender Madness. Peter, I will start with you. Can you give me any evidence whatsoever that inviting a drag queen into a school benefits kids' education?
Well, the context of this motion by the National Education Union is that nearly half of all young LGBT plus pupils in our schools say they're being victimized and bullied because of their sexuality and gender identity. So the teaching union wants to help tackle that bullying and that prejudice, to inform and educate people and to support LGBT plus kids in schools so they don't suffer the way they currently do.
Does bringing a drag queen in help with that?
Sorry?
Does bringing a drag queen in help with that?
Well, most of the people that are going to be invited to the schools are vetted, qualified, professional LGBT plus people who will talk about LGBT plus history, social issues and so on. Nothing to do with sex whatsoever. The drag queens, there's research which shows that drag queen story time does have a very effective response from young people. A boring teacher, no disrespect to teachers, but a boring everyday teacher won't get as much interest as a drag queen coming into the school.
This is an utter capitulation, Peter. This is an utter.
There is no sex involved whatsoever.
Peter, if teaching in this country has resorted to, I can't get these kids' attention, so I'm going to put a frock on. I mean, I think is that the level we're at? Look, Oli, I'll bring you in now. Oli London here, who's a social media influencer and author of Gender Madness. I want to make it very clear, there's nothing against the idea of drag queens in general. I just find it bizarre that you would introduce them into a school for very young children, and we have seen performances taking place in some cases where they've been quite graphic, Oli.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, firstly, why do we have this constant push recently to be bringing drag queens that are typically sexualised acts in front of children? We've seen many exposés of drag shows in the UK. There was one recently with babies as young as 2, with people in fetish gear twerking in front of the kids. So we see time and time again these drag acts become sexualised, and there are drag queens out there that are perfectly fine, and nobody's got a problem with that. But it's when you are bringing this into schools. Why do we need to have this in schools? Why can't we just continue teaching kids English, sports, history? Why this constant push to confuse kids with gender ideology? I just think it's so harmful.
Peter, is there a wider issue here about the exposure of graphic adult sexual, organs in the cases of this Channel 4 show about naked education? I mean, do you not think there's something a bit weird, Peter, about people who want to go on national television and get their bits out in front of kids?
Well, first let me say there is no sexual content in any drag queen performance in schools. Schools would never allow anything sexual to take place in a school. It's against the school regulations, the government's advice and so on. The example that was just given was to a mother and baby club with the agreement of the mothers. It was to entertain the mothers, not the babies. And the babies are too young to understand what was going on anyway. But the wider issue that you raise, I mean, yes, I don't think it's appropriate for nudity in front of young people. Of course not. But, Channel 4's Naked Education is an attempt to educate young people about sexual health, sexual safety, and positive, constructive, supportive relationships. So in that sense, it is good. I'm not too sure whether the nakedness is actually justified.
Yeah, frankly, that's my main issue with it, really, isn't it? But Ollie, you're shaking your head there. Go on.
Yeah, well, firstly, that's completely untrue what Peter said. There was a school in the Isle of Wight where drag queens were teaching sex education to teenagers, very young teenagers. So, firstly, we know that there are many drag queens that sexualise things. They're teaching sex education and gender ideology. Kids should not be learning this at school. You know, they should be learning the basic subjects to get ahead in life. They should not be sexualised with these things. So it does exist, Peter. I completely disagree with what he's saying there.
Peter, go on.
You said the Isle of Wight. Are you sure it was the Isle of Wight, not the Isle of Man?
Does it matter?
It doesn't matter, Peter.
The Isle of Man was accused of that. They did a full and thorough investigation, and it was proven those allegations are completely and totally false.
Okay,
All
right.
happened in an Isle of Man school.
Okay, fair enough, absolutely fair enough. Now, look, Peter, I just want to know, do you think that parents who might be thinking, look, I don't really necessarily, I'm a bit uncomfortable about the idea of men in drag coming in and reading a book to my kid or doing anything really around the school, do you think that those parents are transphobic?
No, I think they have legitimate concerns, but it's not a concern that's based on rationality, because many of those parents will take their kids to a Christmas pantomime where dames are dressed up in drag, everybody has a great laugh, it's harmless fun. It's the same in the school. Okay. Just the kids have a laugh, they get engaged, they read the books, which, of course, the teachers should have been able to teach them, but they weren't. So they brought the drag queens in, and they got a result. Literacy and reading skills went up.
I get what you're saying, Peter, but the idea that teachers have to resort to drag queens... Ollie, one quick one, very quickly. Look, do you think that at the very core of this, that parents would have any legitimate concern about some form of indoctrination, i.e. some parents... No doubt Peter would say wrongly, but some parents would look at this and go, well, I sent my kid to school and they've come back and they've had some indoctrination and now they're talking about being born into the wrong body, Ollie.
Yeah, absolutely. We see, many whistleblowers exposing this, that kids are being taught things by teachers without parental consent. So, why does a teacher have a right to teach a kids about changing their pronouns, changing their gender when they're 5 or 6 years old? That's the conversation between a parent and their child.